The Story of San Michele. Axel Munthe was born in Sweden in 1857. He became a highly successful medical doctor in Paris, visited Naples to offer assistance during the famous cholera outbreak in 1884, and fell in love with the Isle of Capri. He bought the Villa of San Michele and began restoring it, doing much of the work himself, dividing his life between Rome and Capri. In 1929, after an unusual and event-packed life, including 2 marriages and the King and Queen of Sweden, Munthe wrote and published The Story of San Michele, or The Tales of a Doctor, which made him world famous. In 1973, my husband, Dr. Miles Heffernan of Oriel College, Oxford, and Shepherd's Bush, London, took his young bride to Capri, and we visited the Villa of San Michele, along with various villas of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. I'd never heard of Axel Munthe, but I fell in love with the magical Roman villa in the sky. Years later, I read the book. I loved it. It was like meeting my now dead husband again, and it gave me an insight into his character. Miles, a GP, was very like the storyteller. We all have impossible dreams to build our own heavenly palace on this earth for posterity, and Munthe did so 4 times. San Michele was not the only memorable house that Munthe built and restored. There are 3 others, all museums. You can look them up, 1 in Sweden and 2 in England. The following audio chapter, with images, tells of how Munthe's protagonist, a young, successful, fashionable Swedish doctor, had the inspiration to restore a villa of Tiberius. We all start out our life with dreams, but few of us succeed in leaving a captivating villa that is still visited by millions of people over a century later. If you've not discovered this inspirational novella already, I hope this excerpt will encourage you to do so. The Story of San Michele. My home must be open to the sun, to the wind, and to the voice of the sea, just like a Greek temple. And light, light, light everywhere. Axel Munthe. Chapter 11. The Miracle of San Antonio. Read by Janette Miller. San Antonio had done another miracle. I was living in a little contadino, a farmer's house in Anna Capri, whitewashed and clean, with a sunny pergola outside the open windows and friendly, simple people all around me. Old Marie Portaletera, the post lady, La Bella Margherita, Annarella and Gioconda were all delighted to see me back amongst them. Don Dionisio's wine, Capri Bianco, white wine, was better than ever, and it dawned on me more and more that Parocco's Capri Rosso, the red, was equally good. From sunrise to sunset, I was hard at work in what had been Maestro Vincenzio's garden, digging the foundations of the huge arches of the loggia outside my future home. Mastro Nicola and his 3 sons were digging by my side, and 6 girls with laughing eyes and swinging hips were carrying away the earth in huge baskets on their heads. A yard below the surface, we'd come upon the Roman walls, opus reticulatum, Latin, as hard as granite, with nymphs and bacchantes dancing on the plaster of Pompeian red. Below appeared the mosaic floor, framed with vine leaves of antique black marble, and a broken pavement of beautiful Polombino marble, now in the centre of the big loggia. A fluted column of Cipollino, white marble, now supporting the little loggia in the inner courtyard, lay across the pavement, where it had fallen 2,000 years ago, crushing in its fall a big vase of white Greek Parian marble, the lion-headed handle of which is now lying on my table. "Stuff of Tiberius," said Maestro Nicola, picking up a mutilated head of Augustus split in two. "You can see it in the loggia today." When the macaroni was ready, the bells in the church rang mezzogiorno, "Bon appetit," "Good day," and we all sat down for a hearty meal round an enormous plate of insalata di pomodoro, minestrone, or macaroni. Soon to be at work again till sunset. When the bells below in Capri rang Ave Maria, my fellow workers all made the sign of the cross. "Good sleep, Excellency. Good night, Signor." Their wish was overheard by San Antonio. He worked another miracle. I slept soundly the whole night, as I'd not slept for years. I rose with the sun, sprang down to the lighthouse for my morning bath, and was back in the garden as the others returned to work from the 5 o'clock early morning mass. None of my fellow workers could read or write. None had ever worked at the building of any other houses like those of the farmers' houses, all more or less alike. But Maestro Nicola knew how to build an arch, as did his father and his grandfather from untold generations. The Romans had been their masters. That this was going to be a different house from any that they'd ever seen before had already dawned upon them. They were all tremendously interested. Nobody knew so far what it was going to look like, and nor did I. All we had to go by was a rough sort of sketch, drawn by myself with a piece of charcoal on the white garden wall. I can't draw anything. It looked as if drawn by the hand of a child. "This is my house," I explained to them, "with huge Roman columns supporting its vaulted rooms, and, of course, small Gothic columns in all the windows. This is the loggia, with its strong arches. We'll decide by and by how many arches there will be. And here comes a pergola. Over 100 columns leading up to the chapel. Never mind the public road running straight across my pergola now. It will have to go. Here, looking out on Castillo Barbarossa, comes another loggia. I don't quite see what it looks like for the present, but I'm sure it will spring out of my head at the right moment. And this is the small inner court, all white marble, a sort of atrium with a cool fountain in its midst, and heads of Roman emperors in niches round the walls. Here, behind the house, we are going to knock down that garden wall and build a cloister, something like the Lateran cloister in Rome. And here comes a large terrace where all you girls will dance the tarantella on summer evenings. On top of the garden, we shall blast away the rock and build a Greek theatre open all sides to sun and wind. This is an avenue of cypresses leading up to the chapel, which we will of course rebuild as a chapel with cloister stalls and stained glass windows. I intend to make it my library. This is a colonnade with twisted Gothic columns surrounding the chapel. And here, looking out over the Bay of Naples, we're going to hoist an enormous Egyptian sphinx of red granite, older than Tiberius himself. It is the very place for a sphinx. I don't see for the present where I shall get it from, but I'm sure it will turn up in time. They were all delighted and eager to finish the house at once. Maestro Nicola wanted to know where the water for all the fountains was to come from. Oh, of course, from heaven, where all the water on the island comes from. I intended, besides, to buy the whole mountain of Barbarossa and build an enormous cistern there for collecting rainwater and supply the whole village with water, now so badly needed. It was the least I could do for them to repay all their kindness to me. When I drew the outlines for the little cloister with my stick in the sand, I saw it at once, just as it stands now, encircling with its graceful arcades, its little court of cypresses, with the dancing faun in the midst. When we found the earthenware vase full of Roman coins, they became tremendously excited. Every little farmer's house, contadino, on the island has been on the lookout for the treasure of Tiberius for 2,000 years. It was only later, when cleaning these coins, that I found amongst them the gold coin, fresh as if it had been coined today, fleur de coin. Indeed, the finest likeness of the old emperor I have ever seen. Close by we found 2 bronze hooves of an equestrian statue, one still in my possession, the other stolen, 10 years later, by a tourist. The whole garden was full of thousands and thousands of polished slabs of coloured marble, Africano, Pavonzetto, Greek, green, white, alabaster, all now forming the pavement of the big loggia, the chapel, and some of the terraces. A broken cup of agate of exquisite shape, several broken and unbroken Greek vases, innumerable fragments of early Roman sculpture, including, according to Maestro Nicola, the leg of Tiberius. Dozens of Greek and Roman inscriptions came to light as we were digging. While we were planting the cypresses bordering the little lane to the chapel, we came upon a tomb with the skeleton of a man. He had a Greek coin in his mouth. The bones are still there, where we found them. The skull is lying on my writing table. The huge arcades of the big loggia rose rapidly out of the earth. One by one, the 100 white columns of the pergola stood out against the sky. What had once been Maestro Vincenzo's house and his carpenter's workshop were gradually transformed and enlarged into what has become my future home. How it was done, I've never been able to understand, nor has anybody else who knows the history of San Michele of today. I knew absolutely nothing about architecture, nor did any of my fellow workers. Nobody who could read or write ever had anything to do with the work. No architect was ever consulted. No proper drawing or plan was ever made. No exact measurements were ever taken. It was all done on the fly, as Maestro Nicola called it. Often, of an evening, when the others had gone away, I used to sit alone on the broken parapet outside the little chapel where my sphinx was to stand, watching with my mind's eye the castle of my dreams rise out of the twilight. Often as I sat there, I thought I saw a tall figure in a long mantle wandering about under the half-finished vaults of the loggia below, carefully examining the day's work, testing the strength of the new structures, bending over the rudimentary outlines drawn by me on the sand. Who was the mysterious overseer? Was it the venerable Sant'Antonio himself, who had climbed down on the sly from his shrine in the church to work another miracle here? Or was it the tempter of my youth, who 12 years ago had stood by my side on this very spot, offering me his help in exchange for my future? It had become so dark that I could no longer see his face, but I thought I saw the blade of a sword glistening under a red mantle. When we returned to work next morning, just on the point where we had stopped short the evening before, in great perplexity as what to do and how to do it, all my difficulties seemed to have been removed during the night. All the hesitation had left me. I saw it all in my mind's eye clearly, as if it had been drawn by an architect in its minutest details. Maria, the post lady, had brought me a couple of days before a letter from Rome. I flung it unopened in a drawer of my deal table to join a dozen of other unread letters. I had no time for the world outside Capri. There is no post in heaven. Then an unheard-of thing happened. There came a telegram to Anna Capri, painfully signalled 2 days before from the semaphore at Massa Lubrenz. It had, in the course of time, reached the Capri semaphore and then Anna Capri, and had been put on the top of Maria, the post lady's, fish basket. Maria, the post lady, had never seen a telegram before. And after she had tried everybody on Anna Capri, she landed at my door. Wouldn't I try to read the telegram and tell what was in it? No, I would not. I hated telegrams. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. Was it true there was a war between Italy and the Turks? Yelled the crowd under the garden wall. I didn't know. I didn't care in the least if there was a war, as long as I was left in peace to dig in my garden. Old Maria, the post lady, sank down dejectedly on the column of white marble. She said she'd been on her legs with the telegram since daybreak. With nothing else to eat, she could do no more. She besides was going to feed the cow. Would I care to take of the telegram till tomorrow morning? It would not be safe to leave it in her keeping with all her grandchildren playing about the room. Not to speak of the chickens and the pig. Old Maria, the postwoman, was a great friend of mine. I felt sorry for her and for the cow. I put the telegram in my pocket. She was to resume her wanderings with it the next morning. The sun sank into the sea. The bells rang Ave Maria. We all went home to our supper. And as I was sitting under my pergola with a bottle of Don Diozinio's best wine before me, a terrible thought suddenly flashed through my brain. Fancy if the telegram was for me after all. Having fortified myself with another glass of wine, I put the telegram on the table before me and set to work to try to translate, with its mysterious meaning, into human language. It took me a whole bottle of wine to satisfy myself it was not for me. I fell asleep, my head on the table, the telegram in my hand. I slept late the next morning. There was no need to hurry. Nobody was working my garden today. Surely they were all in church since morning mass. It was Good Friday. As I strolled up to San Michele a couple of hours later, I was greatly surprised to find Maestro Nicola, with his 3 sons and all the girls, hard at work in the garden as usual. Of course they knew how anxious I was to go on with the work full speed, but I would never have dreamt to ask them to work on Good Friday. Indeed, it was kind of them. I told them I was very grateful. Maestro Nicola looked at me with evident surprise and said it was no feast day today. No holiday today? Didn't he know it was Good Friday, the day of the crucifixion of our Lord Jesus Christ? Oh, va bene, said Maestro Nicola. Jesus Christ was not a saint. Of course he was a saint, the greatest saint of all. But not as great as Sant' Antonio, who has done more than 100 miracles. How many miracles has Jesus Christ done? He asked with a malicious look at me. Nobody knew better than I that Sant'Antonio was not as easy to beat on miracles. What greater miracle could have been made than bringing me back to this village? Avoiding Maestro Nicola's question, I said that with all honour due to Sant'Antonio, he was but a man, while Jesus Christ was the Son of our Lord in heaven, who in order to save us all from his hell had suffered death on the cross this very day. Oh, not true, said Maestro Nicola, resuming his digging with great vigour. It's not true. They put him to death yesterday to shorten the services in the church. I had barely time to recover from this announcement when a well-known voice called me by name from outside the garden wall. It was my friend, the newly appointed Swedish minister in Rome. He was furious for not having had an answer to his letter, announcing his intention to come and spend the Easter with me, and still more offended that I had not been in decency to meet him at the marina with a donkey on the arrival of the post-boat, as he begged me to do in his telegram. He would never have come to Isle of Capri had he known he would have to climb all by himself those 777 Phoenician steps leading up to my wretched village. Would I have the cheek to say I'd not got his telegram? Of course I got it. We all got it. I nearly got drunk over it. He softened a little when I handed him the telegram. He said he wanted to take it to Rome to show to the Minister of the Post and Telegraphs. I snatched it from him, warning him that to improve the communications between Capri and the mainland would be strenuously opposed by me. I was delighted to show my friend over the place and to explain to him all the future wonders of San Michele, with an occasional reference to my sketch on the wall in order to make him understand it more clearly, which he said was much needed. He was full of admiration, and when he looked down from the chapel on the fair island at his feet, when I pointed out to him the place for the huge Egyptian sphinx of red granite, he gave me an uneasy side glance. And when I showed him where the mountain was going to be blasted away for the erection of my Greek theatre, he said he felt somewhat giddy and asked me to take him to my villa and give him a glass of wine. He wanted to have a quiet talk with me. His eyes wandered round my whitewashed room. He asked me if this was my villa. I answered I'd never been quite so comfortable in my life. I put a flask of Dionysos wine on the deal table, invited him to sit down on my chair, and threw myself on the bed, ready to listen to what he had to say. My friend asked me if I'd not been spending much of my time these last years at the Salpêtrière among more or less queer and unhinged people, somewhat shaky in their upper story. I said he was not far from the truth, but I'd given up on the Salpêtrière altogether. He said it was very glad to hear it. He thought it was high time. I better take up some other speciality. He was very fond of me. In fact, he'd come down to try to persuade me to return at once to my splendid position in Paris, instead of wasting my time among these peasants on Isle of Capri. Now, since he'd seen me, he'd changed his mind. He'd come to the conclusion I was in need of a thorough rest. I said I was very glad he'd approved of my decision. I really couldn't stand the strain of it any longer. I was tired out. In the head, he asked sympathetically. I told him it was useless to ask me to return to Paris. I was going to spend the rest of my days in Isle of Capri. You mean to say you're going to spend your life in this wretched little village, all alone among these peasants who can neither read nor write? You, who are a man of culture, who are you going to associate with? With myself, my dogs, and perhaps a monkey. You always say you can't live without music. Who's going to sing to you? Who's going to play to you? Well, the birds in the garden. The sea around me. Listen. Do you hear that wonderful mezzo-soprano? It is the golden Oriel. Isn't his voice more beautiful than the voice of our celebrated compatriot Christine Nielsen or Patty herself? Do you hear that solemn andante of the waves? Isn't that more beautiful than the slow movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony? Changing abruptly the conversation, my friend asked me who was my architect and in what style the house was going to be built. I told him I had no architect, and that so far I didn't know in what style the house was going to be built. All that would settle itself as the work went on. He gave me another uneasy side glance and said he was at least glad to know that I'd left Paris a rich man. Surely it needed a large fortune to build such a magnificent villa as I'd described to him. I opened the drawer of my deal table and showed him a bundle of banknotes tucked in a stocking. I said it was all I possessed in this world after 12 years of hard work in Paris. I believe it amounted to something like 15,000 francs, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, probably a little less. Listen, incorrigible dreamer, to the voice of a friend, said the Swedish minister. Tapping his forehead with his finger, he went on. You do not see straighter than your ex-patients in the Salpêtrière. The trouble is evidently catching. Make an effort to see things as they are in reality and not in your dreams. At the rate you're going on, your stocking will be empty in a month's time, and so far I see no trace of a single room to live in. I saw nothing but half-finished loggias, terraces, cloisters and pergolas. With what are you going to build your house? Well, with my hands. Once established in your house, what are you going to live on? Oh, macaroni. It will cost at least 500,000 to build your San Michele, as you see it, in your imagination. Where are you going to get the money from? I was dumbfounded. I'd never thought of it. It was altogether a new point of view. What on earth am I going to do? I said at last, staring at my friend. I will tell you what you are to do, said my friend with his resolute voice. "You are to stop work at once on your crazy San Michele. Clear out your whitewashed room, and since you decline to return to Paris, you are to go to Rome and take up your work as a doctor. Rome is the very place for you. You need only spend the winters there. You will have the long summers to go on with your building. You have got San Michele on the brain, but you are not a fool. Or at least most people have not found it out so far. You have besides luck in everything you lay your hands on. I'm told there are 44 foreign doctors practicing in Rome. If you pull yourself together and set to work in earnest, you can beat them all with your left hand. If you work hard and hand over your earnings to me, I bet you anything you like that in less than 5 years you'll have made enough money to finish your San Michele and live happily the rest of your life in the company of your dogs and your monkeys." After my friend had left, I spent a terrible night wandering up and down in my little farmer's room like an animal in a cage. I dared not even go up to the chapel to say good night to the Sphinx of my dreams. This was my wont. I was afraid that the tempter in the red mantle might once more stand by my side in the twilight. When the sun rose, I rushed down to the lighthouse and sprang into the sea. When I swam ashore, my head was clear and cool, like the waters of the Gulf. 2 weeks later, I was established as a doctor in Keats' house in Rome.